The movie begins with a traditional Western tale presenting the mysterious Ghost Rider, a cursed soul destined to travel the planet and carry out the evil contracts that emerge once every generation. A long time ago, Carter Slade, a Ghost Rider, set out to retrieve a contract weighing the weight of 1,000 evil souls from the isolated community of San Venganza. Mephisto, the devil himself, could not have ownership of this contract due to its immense power. That's why Carter decided to ride out with it and avoid the devil's attentions. 50 years later, in '86, Johnny Blaze and his father Barton are collaborating to do daring motorcycle stunts. But Johnny's constant interruptions, brought on by his girlfriend Roxanne, who was seated in the crowd, have strained their relationship. During their high-stakes performances, Johnny's life was seriously endangered by these diversions. Even though Barton was becoming sicker every day, he continued to smoke despite Johnny's best efforts to convince him to give it up. One evening, Roxanne shared the heartbreaking news that her father had decided to take her away to live with her mother after seeing Johnny. Johnny couldn't bear the prospect of losing her, so he offered a solution. Roxanne approved the idea, and the following day was chosen as the execution date. Later that night, as Barton was fast asleep, Johnny came across a discarded hospital letter in which it was revealed that Barton's cancer was spreading. Johnny was taken aback by this discovery. His father had kept such a serious sickness hidden from him. He began to doubt the possibility of fleeing with Roxanne, afraid he would abandon Barton in a deplorable state. However, a sudden interruption came in the form of Mephisto. He made Johnny an ominous proposition. He would cure Barton's cancer in exchange for Johnny's soul. Initially skeptical, Johnny inspected the contract out of curiosity, inadvertently cutting his finger in the process. A single drop of blood sealed the deal, much to Johnny's astonishment. Before he could inquire about the implications, he lost consciousness and woke up the next morning in his own bed. Mephisto had kept his word. Barton's cancer was miraculously gone. Barton, brimming with excitement, was already planning a new stunt show, possibly featuring a helicopter jump, and he wanted Johnny to be part of it. Johnny, however, had different aspirations and yearned for a life beyond perilous stunts, deeply hurting Barton. Despite their differences, Johnny didn't want to risk Roxanne's father sending the police after them, so he accepted Barton's offer to take his most cherished bike. Just as Johnny was about to depart, a commotion in a nearby tent grabbed his attention. He rushed back and discovered that his father had met his demise during the show, following Mephisto's visit. Terrified by the contract's entanglements, Johnny contemplated ending his own life, but Mephisto intervened, emphasizing that he required Johnny to remain alive, promising to return when he needed Johnny's assistance. Before vanishing, he instructed Johnny to leave behind everything he held dear. Fearing the unknown, Johnny embarked on his journey with only his bike. He passed by Roxanne, who was waiting for him, but he left without an explanation. Fast forward to 2007, 21 years later, Johnny had transformed into a renowned stunt rider known for surviving every fall. Yet, the shadow of Mephisto's contract loomed over him, occasionally interfering with his performances. As he stayed in regular contact with his traveling companions, especially his best friend Mac, who was terribly worried about Johnny's resolve to jump over cars on the anniversary of Barton's disaster, Johnny had never done interviews. Mac was also unable to overlook Johnny's obsession with enigmatic religious books that appeared to have an impact on his mental health. Despite Mac's worries, Johnny brushed them aside, explaining he was waiting for a sign. Meanwhile, Mephisto's son, Blackheart, made his appearance on Earth, entering a biker bar with the intent to massacre every human inside. Once the grim deed was done, the hidden three fallen angels bound to elemental powers, Gressel, Earth, Abigor, Air, and Wallow, Water, materialized. Blackheart sought their aid in locating the San Venganza contract, aiming to wield its tremendous power and dominate the world, and the Hidden readily agreed. Before they could proceed, Mephisto materialized to remind Blackheart that his time hadn't yet come. But Blackheart was undeterred by his father's caution. Mephisto couldn't harm Blackheart on Earth, as Blackheart had never fallen, unlike the Ghost Rider. Fueled by envy, Blackheart dared to unleash the Ghost Rider upon his father, who had bestowed extraordinary powers upon a human instead of him. The next day, Johnny got ready for his performance, eluding the press as usual. But when he saw an adult Roxanne showing up for an interview, he made an exception. Johnny was eager to find out what she had been up to all these years, so he switched roles and answered her questions instead. The interview broke up abruptly because Roxanne didn't think Johnny's risky stunts were funny, and she departed even though her cameraman wanted her to stay. Johnny, on the other hand, interpreted the encounter as the sign he had been awaiting. He resolved to replace his dark thoughts with Roxanne's presence and successfully completed his helicopter jump, an electrifying success. Instead of celebrating, though, Johnny made a different choice. He drove out of the venue, racing to catch up with Roxanne's van on the road. Initially unwilling to pull over or speak to him, Roxanne's resistance crumbled as Johnny blocked her path, imploring her to stop. Though Roxanne was furious, Johnny pointed out that if she truly wanted nothing to do with him, she would have declined the interview before planting a kiss on her lips. Roxanne pushed him away, but she also acknowledged the validity of his point, agreeing to join him for dinner later. As night fell, Roxanne waited at the restaurant, growing anxious at the absence of messages from Johnny, who was already running late. Meanwhile, Johnny was back at his apartment, delayed by a strange sensation, his hands turning red and hot, accompanied by a mysterious voice calling his name. When he stepped outside, he found Mephisto, who implored Johnny to stop Blackheart as it was part of their contract. Initially defiant, Johnny got on his bike, ready for his date. However, the contract's magic abruptly took hold, enveloping the bike in flames and whisking Johnny away at breakneck speed, leaving destruction in its wake. Simultaneously, Blackheart and the Hidden converged on a local train station, rumored to be the original resting place of the San Venganza contract. The station's keeper revealed that the graves had been moved to a church graveyard, attempting to banish the group and meeting his demise at the hands of Blackheart. Back to Johnny, the bike guided him to a warehouse at the train station, where he lost control and transformed into a blazing skeleton known as Ghost Rider. Blackheart located Johnny but underestimated his power, dispatching Gressel to confront him before departing. Surprisingly, Johnny proved to be far more formidable than expected and effortlessly overcame Gressel's attack. He used his unique flame chain to subdue the demon swiftly. Afterward, he harnessed his newfound powers to enhance his bike into a more formidable machine and continued his journey. While on the road, Johnny stumbled upon a teenager in the midst of a mugging. He intervened, employing his penance stare, a power that made mortals experience the pain they had inflicted on others. The thief, overwhelmed by the suffering he had caused, succumbed to the agony. Johnny continued his ride until he reached the local graveyard just as the sun began to rise, returning to his human form as he arrived at his father's grave. Unbeknownst to him, Carter Slade was buried nearby. At the graveyard, Johnny's transformation caught the attention of the caretaker, who took Johnny to his humble shack after he lost consciousness. A few hours later, Johnny awoke with a throbbing headache, and the caretaker emphasized the reality of the previous night's events. He urged Johnny to accept that being Ghost Rider was now a part of his life, offering his guidance and support. While tending to Johnny's injuries, the caretaker told him of the sinister past of San Venganza, a village where its residents' avaricious self-destruction left their souls stranded for eternity. Roxanne, meanwhile, was interviewing the youngster who just missed being mugged while covering the chaos at the train station for the news. She did not, however, find the girl's description of a blazing skeleton particularly credible. Johnny approached Roxanne following the interview with the intention of apologizing for his previous behavior. She continued to be unkind, pointing out that this was the second time he had injured her and suggesting that her father's assessment of him was accurate, that he was merely a fleeting phase. As the police discovered a license plate from Johnny's bike among the wreckage at the station, Johnny and Mac returned home to explore the religious texts for clues regarding their predicament. When night fell, Blackheart and Wallow paid the caretaker a visit, demanding the location of the San Venganza contract. When he refused to cooperate, they resorted to violence. They also threatened Johnny's career, but the caretaker remained steadfast, prompting them to lock him in a cell until he was ready to confess. The cell was filled with inmates eager to harm a famous person, but as they closed in, night finally fell, and Johnny transformed into Ghost Rider. He easily subdued all the prisoners except for a teenager with a pure soul. After acquiring another prisoner's jacket, Johnny incinerated the cell bars and made his escape on his bike, disregarding the police's attempts to stop him, even driving on water. Blackheart sensed that Ghost Rider was coming for them and dispatched Abigor to intercept him. This led to a citywide chase with the police in pursuit. Johnny pursued Abigor all over the city, resulting in a dramatic confrontation on a tall building. This spectacle was witnessed by Roxanne from her hotel room, causing her to start believing the incredible story. On the rooftop, Johnny's chain trick failed to capture Abigor because it couldn't grasp something made of air. Quick on his feet, Johnny created a fiery hurricane with the chain, absorbing Abigor and defeating him. Following this, Johnny landed his bike in the middle of the street, where he spotted Roxanne in the curious crowd. Although he wanted to approach her, the police blocked his path. Their bullets proved ineffective, and Johnny used a wall of fire to push them back before departing safely. With the sunrise approaching, Johnny made his way to the graveyard and sought the caretaker's guidance. The caretaker explained the story behind Carter Slade and the stolen contract, emphasizing that Blackheart would stop at nothing to get to Johnny, even if it meant harming his loved ones. Johnny rushed back to the city to check on Roxanne. The police, still determined to locate Johnny, enlisted Roxanne's assistance, given her proximity to him. She pretended to be ignorant of his whereabouts. Upon visiting Johnny's apartment, Roxanne found Mac there, eager to understand the situation concerning his best friend. While hesitant to share the unbelievable story, Roxanne agreed to delve into the religious texts with Mac in search of clues. As night fell once more, Blackheart and Wallow returned to the caretaker, resorting to violence in an attempt to extract the contract's location. The caretaker remained unyielding. Blackheart then proceeded to Johnny's apartment, where he killed Mac and abducted Roxanne. Johnny arrived shortly afterward and confronted Blackheart, but his penance stare had no effect because Blackheart lacked a soul. Blackheart pushed Johnny aside, dispelling his transformation, and took Roxanne captive, demanding that Johnny surrender the San Venganza contract. This ignited another fierce confrontation. However, with the sunrise quickly approaching, Johnny lost his powers, rendering him unable to prevent Blackheart from taking the contract and absorbing the power of the 1,000 evil souls, transforming into Legion. Despite the deprivation of his supernatural abilities, Johnny refused to surrender. Determined, he sought to harness the shadows, attempting to imbue his shotgun with their mystical energy. With this enhanced weapon, he successfully vanquished Legion. However, as the demon started to regenerate, Johnny observed the souls coalescing to reconstruct its form. Relentlessly, Johnny accepted the darkness once more, changing to become the Ghost Rider. Roxanne strode toward Johnny, her touch running across his face like the flames of burning passion. In an intense moment, she kissed him. As they were leaving the place, they were stopped in their tracks by Mephisto, a dark presence who congratulated Johnny on his victory and requested the return of Ghost Rider's power. Resolutely, Johnny rejected the offer, aware of the risk of this force falling into the wrong hands. He chose to keep his power to protect the innocent, even if that decision meant giving up his chance to live a normal life. Realizing the depth of this choice, Roxanne said goodbye to him. Johnny rode into the shrouded world into the sunset, starting a new life as the one and only Ghost Rider, determined to spread justice and protect the innocent.